Good evening. I'm David Smith, and welcome back to Week in Review. This evening we'll be discussing the President's attack on the Supreme Court and the continuing discussion on utopianism and social engineering. Good evening. I'm David Smith, and I'm here with our co-host, Eric Hoffman, who joins us by telephone from San Diego, California, and our co-host and producer, Daniel Moran, who is with us in the studio. This evening we'll be discussing what apparently is the big topic of the past week, the President's comments directed to the Supreme Court regarding judicial activism and the hearings on Obamacare. We'll also be tying this in with our continuing investigation and comments on social engineering and utopianism, which seems to be an important issue at this time. Well, gentlemen, what do you think? There's been quite an uproar. Even the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals directed the White House and the Justice Department to provide them with a no less than 3-page response to the court's inquiry regarding the administration's attitude toward the judiciary and their right of review of the legislation of Congress.
I have never seen a president, well, in my lifetime, I guess there's maybe was some before, that has actually actively sought a war on the judicial branch.
Aside from Franklin Roosevelt's attempt to pack the court with threat to nominate 6 additional justices who would force through his particular agenda, I've never heard of anything quite this bad, especially from a man who is supposed to be a constitutional scholar. That was his area of expertise, supposedly in law school, as a student and also as a professor at the law school at University of Chicago.
Yeah, I never thought I'd hear this from a lawyer either.
That was rather
Republican or Democrat.
Rather surprising. You know, I was just flabbergasted when I listened to his remarks. It's again as if he missed the day they taught law at law school.
Yeah, you might expect this from a general like Andrew Jackson, but I never expected this from a lawyer.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder. He's licensed as an attorney in the state of Illinois. He's taught constitutional law, and he's the President of the United States. This is disturbing. This is, you know...
Yeah, well, this is what we were talking about before. This is utopianism again. This is why the left doesn't seem to have any moral compass. It's like whatever leads to utopianism is good. They don't care any way it's done. It's the ends justifies the means.
Well, I understand some of the motivation of the left. After all, the issue that the right wants to challenge is the individual mandate, which is a part of what the right required in the healthcare debate in the Reagan administration in order to keep funding their friends in the insurance industry. They didn't want a single payer system. They wanted an individual mandate so that the insurance companies could continue to make money. But now that they have it, this is what they want. The right wants to challenge in the law.
Yeah, it's just that the people don't want it.
Yes, they want a single-payer health system where everyone pays in equally and
yeah, the people want either a single payer or no mandate or something else entirely.
Yes. Because they're understanding that the mandate is simply a way to enrich the insurance companies and keep them funded.
Like we were talking about, it's going to lead to a 2-tier healthcare system anyway.
Yeah, that's what everyone is opposed to, is this There will be health care for those who can afford it, and for those who can't, you'll get the illusion of it, but you won't get the actual product itself.
You get the pain pill, like Obama said.
Yes. So I understand the president's, it's also his signature piece of legislation. This was supposed to put him on the political map the way Social Security did for FDR, and Medicare and Medicaid did for LBJ.
Well, it's going to put him on the political map one way or another.
Yes. And I think you're right in your assessment, Eric, of this is a continuing attempt at utopianism.
Yeah.
And this is a continuing attempt to social engineer and create a utopian society. But, of course, the president has realized, or has known all along, that you cannot do that in a Republican democracy. You have to, the only way that works is with a dictator.
Yeah. Yeah, what she was acting like, all of a sudden now he's defending Congress. All of us remember a couple of months ago when he was trashing Congress.
He even ignored them in the issue of the war powers, which is exclusively a congressional prerogative. It doesn't belong to the executive branch. The executive branch can execute the war once the Congress declares it. But Congress alone has the power to declare the war. And we have Leon Panetta sitting up there before a congressional hearing indicating that they're going to take their authority to commit U.S. troops from NATO and the United Nations, and when they get these mandates, they'll decide, the executive branch will decide what to do, and they may or may not come to the Congress to inform them of the fact, depending on how they feel on any given day.
Yeah. Well, you know how I feel about this. This is outrageous. And as you know, I feel that NATO and the UN are both organizations that we need to get out of.
Well, I think there's, this is coming down to I think a pivotal election. I know we keep saying that every election is the most crucial. However, this one is pitting the socialist against I think,
yeah, you're right.
Conservatives, because
the capitalists. I think this election is going to determine, if the United States survives as a country.
Because
Obama cannot pay for all of his programs and all of his ambitions, so they're just going to print more money. And I mean, no one wants to say it, but the reason gas prices are going up is not because gas is more expensive, oil is more expensive. It's because the dollar's dropped.
No, the dollar's dropped, and also it's just, do you know the XL pipeline would have brought us oil for $55 a barrel.
Yep.
We now pay, or is it $33? $33 a barrel. We now pay $107 a barrel for it. It may be more now, but and it has to come 7,500 miles from the Middle East rather than 500 miles from Canada.
And Canada's already announced that they're going to get rid of that discount to us now that they're going to start selling on the world market.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. President. You know.
Thank you. Well, yeah, because they said now that they have to diversify into the world market, they're going to sell it at the world price.
Yes, which is we had a sweet deal, and the Canadians wanted to sell us the oil. They wanted to sell it to us, not to anyone else. And now, you know.
No, Obama blew that up. Well, this is his continuing utopianism to deindustrialize the United States. Utopianism always ends up as primitivism.
Yeah, primitive and the problem is we don't even have an agricultural economy anymore.
No.
We did at one time. We were a powerhouse agriculturally and industrially, and now we're neither.
No, we're neither.
So I don't know what, we can't survive on information alone.
Oh, no. Well, our money's going to be worthless very soon at the rate that Bernanke and Obama are printing money.
Well, I saw an article today which was disturbing. The interest, the payment on interest, the national debt, will exceed the defense budget by 2019.
Yeah. If we're lucky, it stays that long, huh?
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
the projection of I think the COB, the Congressional Budget Office, the amount of interest we're required to pay on the national debt will exceed the defense budget by 2019.
No one mentions this, but eventually China's going to want their money back.
Well, the only option we have there is war. That's the only way we can enforce the continued hegemony of the United States dollar. Is
Well,
simply threatening to invade your country.
Has not gotten out of Afghanistan. I mean, the whole country now wants, left and right, everybody wants us out.
Well, that war, Obama should have gotten us out of there and not undertaken that surge. That was not
perfect opportunity when Osama bin Laden was killed to declare victory, and we could have left with honor.
Well, that was what we were supposed to do. That was the objective, was to get bin Laden, and whether he died there or not, we declared that he had, and that gave us a good reason to leave.
Yeah.
And the Afghans wanted to know why we didn't leave. Why had we not left?
Well, I'm curious why we didn't leave either. I'm sure it's because of the defense contractors and all the deals.
And of course now we're interfering with the Pacific Theater, which is China's domain. We're going into Burma, interfering with the Burmese elections, and sending our Marines to Australia.
Yeah.
I think the first 500 arrived in Australia the other day, just a couple of days ago. The first of 2,500 who are supposed to be billeted in Australia now.
This is ridiculous. What are we going to do, invade Burma?
I guess. Of course, right after Hillary Clinton visited, they had what appears to be a pretty fair and open election. A couple of days ago, Sun Yee, the leader of the Democratic Party there in Burma, won a seat in the parliament, and apparently the election was pretty fair. They're not really challenging it. It had a few problems, as all elections do, but it was pretty open and pretty fair.
Well, speaking of elections, I don't know if any of you heard, but Obama has sold the company that counts our elections is now based in Spain.
Really?
Yeah.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, well, our typical great news media didn't cover it.
Of course not, because we've had so much fraud in those elections. In fact, I forget which primary it was. I think it was the Indiana primary, which was held on a Tuesday. They accidentally put up on the screen during a news broadcast the results of the election on the previous Monday evening. And of course, Mitt Romney won.
Yeah.
So the votes had already been counted and tallied by the machines before the election ever occurred.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a real problem. This vote fraud is so extensive.
Well, yeah. I mean,
and when we have it now, how do we get it? It complicates the process of getting a review, because the machinery, the hardware, the people who control it are in a foreign country.
Yeah, and there's going to be no paper ballots if it's all computerized. So recounts are going to be just about impossible.
Yeah. So now I think we need to go back to my idea. One big piece of butcher paper, 2 candidates on it, and a crayon.
Yep.
And so it takes a full day or 2 days to count the votes. Big deal. You count them by precinct. The precinct reports it, and that's it.
I agree completely.
After all, we don't really have a national election. We have 50 general elections in 50 states, which are then broken down into precincts, hundreds of precincts across each state.
Well, yeah, I agree with you that that's what we should do, but that's not the way things are moving. Like I said, the fraud's going to be rampant this presidential election.
No, they're willing to do just about anything to get him reelected. In fact, that comment to Medvedev in the that Obama made, that once I'm get my next election, I'll have more flexibility. The arrogance and presumption is just astounding.
Oh, yeah.
Except for the fact that it could very well happen just by voter fraud alone.
Oh, yeah, that's what I think, yeah. Very well happen. The Democrat holders, of course, fighting every voter ID law on the books. They just went around the Congress and the courts again and issued, extended stay visas to everybody that's illegal, basically, if you can prove you have one relative here.
Well, I don't know if you remember the election in Orange County. Orange County is one of the most conservative counties in the nation. And a Democrat, female Democrat, was elected over the incumbent who had been reelected I don't know how many times. He had served like 20 terms in Congress or something, or it was an enormous number. I mean, and he was presumed to win again because he was right. And she won, and that was the year that they had the motor voter law in California, which allowed anyone who got a driver's license was automatically registered to vote. And there are, of course, a huge number of illegal aliens in Orange County.
Yep.
And she won the election. And, it was obviously voter fraud. And the Republicans decided not to challenge it. I don't know why, but they should have, because it was obviously voter fraud.
Well, my question there is, how are illegal aliens able to acquire a driver's license in the first place?
Because you're not required to provide any form of ID. You're not required to provide a birth certificate or anything. It's considered an economic necessity that you have a license, even if you're here illegally. And therefore, they've given them the ability to get a license. And of course, you're automatically registered to vote at the address that you provide on your license, and therefore you're on the voter rolls.
Well, I guess that makes sense, considering it wasn't too many years ago that Arkansas required your Social Security number as your driver's license number.
And after 9/11, they don't require that for security reasons.
Right.
But I still have to present my state ID card. When I go to register to vote, which having moved recently, but I also need to present my ID card at the polling station as they look up my name on the voter registration rolls.
Well, as people here in California say, we're already living in Obama's second term, and I can tell the rest of the people around the country and our listeners throughout the world, it sucks.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I don't see... it's almost as if the Republicans are attempting to lose this election as they did the last one. They picked John McCain, and then they nominated Sarah Palin. It's like this is a losing ticket. They don't want to even try to win this election. They went through the motions, so there was the appearance of two parties competing. And this time, it looks as if they're trying to do it again.
Well, it might be that the problems are so big.
Well, you have, I forget how many it is, 540 senior executives of international banks throughout the world have resigned over the last month, in February and March. I mean, they've just left the banks because they know something is about to happen, and they don't want to be on board and subject to prosecution when it comes down.
Yeah. No, the Middle East is ready to blow up in war. Well, it's already blowing up in war. They're just kind of keeping it contained.
Yeah, that's the distraction that they're going to provide, is this war in the Middle East.
Now you say they're talking about war in Burma, which would be a disaster.
So it's very, very odd what's going on. You can just look around, and some of these may be nothing more than memes in a psychological operation to keep everyone off guard and off balance. One day you hear Israel's ready to attack, the United States won't support it. The next we have the United States indicating that we need to be prepared to attack at any moment, and Israel comes out and says, well, we won't attack till next year. Nothing. It's this constant confusion that's going on.
And first, the White House leaked Israelis plan to attack from Azerbaijan last week.
Yes. So it's
we're really being a stellar ally.
I don't know what's it's difficult to know what's going on. It's frustrating because
I heard Europe's going back in recession.
Oh yeah, they're expecting they're having trouble growing food there because of the unusual weather this year. So they're predicting record increases in food prices both in Europe and here in the United States as well. So
well, this is what utopianism has gotten us.
Well, this is we were talking about this our last episode when we were discussing the influence of Calvinism and its impact, its continuing impact in the modern world, although most people probably don't see it or recognize it as such. But it's the continuing the Enlightenment philosophers and so on took the model and just removed God from it and established the state as God, and continued on with the same model that Calvin designed.
That's right. Calvin knew very well if you were going to have people equal, it was easier to become all poor. Plus, they were more pious that way.
Yeah, it keeps them. It's much easier in the it's more difficult to redistribute wealth in an equal manner than it is to simply impoverish the majority and keep the elite 1%, the plutocrats and oligarchs who control the system, wealthy.
Well, yeah, we're basically with the Democratic Party, although I still think it's more of a crime cartel, but most crime cartels now have ideological components. They're a theocracy.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is the war between the religious theocracy of the conservatives and the political theocracy of the progressives.
Yeah. Yeah, they're basically a theocracy. This is why, like I said, the courts, nothing really matters except their ideology. Any way that gets there, they don't care.
Well, that's apparent from it. And here we're back to the Supreme Court issue. This assault on the Supreme Court basically is an assault on the equal branches of government on which the Constitution is based. And it's an attempt to create an executive branch that has dictatorial powers.
Yeah.
And the legislative and judicial branches simply become ceremonial.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they want to recreate Calvin's Geneva. You finally just go to Calvin to ask what to do. Or Iran, you go to the Grand Ayatollah there.
Well, that's I know this is, people are upset about this. They're recognizing the problem. And, of course, the White House is having to backpedal. And still trying to defend the president. They have to somehow defend his comments, which are indefensible.
Well, they have the whole mainstream media to help them, so I'm sure they'll pull it off.
Oh, yeah, the propaganda machine is in overdrive, but they're competing against the conservative propaganda machine.
Yeah.
And they're not doing a very good job of it.
No.
So the president's going to take a black eye for this, and it will be a good election issue for the Republicans in the general campaign.
Well, speaking of that, look at the Trayvon Martin issue. Let me first say I don't know if George Zimmerman is guilty or not. But I was willing to let all the facts come in, but ABC and NBC now have admitted doctoring the tapes of him.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, there are a couple of additional stories. I don't know if you know about the story of the man in White Plains, New York. Black man with a heart condition accidentally activated his medic alert pendant. The police came because the medical provider couldn't get him to respond. So, of course, they called the police to respond to a medical emergency. At his apartment, when they got there, he had already contacted the medical alert service and indicated that he was fine. It was an accidental activation of the system and he didn't require any assistance. They conveyed this to the police. The police refused to leave his outside of his apartment, were banging on the door, finally pried it open, and he wound up being shot and killed because he refused to open his door. He told the police who he was, that he was fine and he needed no assistance. And they refused to leave. They pried open the door, tasered him, shot him with a beanbag from a rifle, about 4 of them, and then finally wound up one officer, after calling him the N-word, shot him twice in the chest.
No, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it's another story that's being seized upon by Democracy Now! They're pursuing it. And although it's a bad thing, it's not a national story, or until they brought it up. But there seems to be this movement to bring these stories to the forefront.
Well, to latch on to those polarizing stories.
Yes,
catch
very
people's
much.
attention.
Because Obama is down in the polls. In fact, he's below 50%.
Yeah.
And so they're attempting to find stories that will polarize the voting public and distract them from the economy, the price of gas, the price of food.
Well, what's throwing me is he's directly, there's a pure chain of command from the police all the way up to him. So wouldn't any bad action by the police be blamed on Obama based on these stories?
No, there isn't a chain of command. This is a local issue. Law enforcement is a local issue. It is not something that the federal government should be involved in.
Okay.
You know, they're becoming involved based on civil rights violations. The criminal investigation and the prosecution for any crime is a local matter. It does not involve the federal government. But the Justice Department is involving itself based on federal civil rights violations. So.
Well, like I said, I'm willing to let all the facts come out. After O.J. Simpson, I'm not making any opinions on any suspects till the trial.
Yeah, that's the. But the issue is that, you know, and I believe there is an issue with racism in police departments. I have no doubt about that. But that is a local issue for the state's attorney general to deal with. It is not an issue for the FBI or the federal government to insert itself into.
It's certainly not an issue for the president to be commenting on.
No, it's not. But he's using it as a divisive issue and a distraction.
Well,
which you can always tell how bad the current administration is doing when they start interjecting themselves into local law enforcement issues, claiming civil rights violations.
Yeah. Well, like you said, he's stuck his foot in his mouth with the courts and his utopianism and the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, all of his decisions are bad.
Well, he's done that. The green energy issues. These companies keep going bankrupt. The government has issued hundreds of millions of dollars. They keep going bankrupt. And it seems to be just after they get the federal loan guarantee.
Yeah.
The cronies get their money, and the company goes bankrupt, and the taxpayers are left on the hook.
What's even worse is most of these companies seem to have big contributors to the Democratic Party.
Yes. Because it's this political cronyism that is getting so annoying.
So I can't resist mentioning my one question. Why isn't John Corzine in jail?
Good question. Yeah. I mean,
And I'm gonna
everyone
continue to
wants
ask.
to know why Zimmerman hasn't been arrested. There's another good question, and I'd like to know too. But I'd also like to know why John Corzine hasn't been arrested.
Well, where's the indictment? He lied to Congress. Now the emails proved it.
You know, if you need to impanel a federal grand jury, this man attempted to undermine the commodities market of the nation. You know, that could have created a great instability nationwide. Why isn't he in jail? Or why has he not been arrested and charged with crimes?
And I'm going to keep asking this question until I get an answer from somebody.
You know. Although they did, a couple of days ago, the president signed the Stock Act, which shut down congressional insider trading, which is a good thing. At least they did that.
They had to do it, yeah. They were pretty
they had
much
to do
forced
that.
to do
But
it, yeah.
there's our friend John Corzine on the screen. You know, and they still have not paid back all the money that was lost by investors.
Well, he stole more money than Bernie Madoff, and he's walking around free.
Yeah.
Not even the press mentioning what happened. Why is he out?
Yeah. So it's, but there's these other things are distractions from these more important questions. You know, because these issues affect millions of American citizens. You know, and I'm not trying to diminish it's a tragedy that Trayvon Martin was killed.
No, none of us
It's terrible
are.
if George Zimmerman was a racist and did it for racist and biased motives. We shouldn't have that going on in our country. But John Corzine, you know, when you can't feed your family because you're a poor household, because the commodities prices went up, because John Corzine stole the money of farmers so they don't have money to buy seed and plant crops, that's a big issue.
Yeah, that's a bigger issue than George Zimmerman, but like I said, the facts are eventually coming out on Zimmerman, and I don't appreciate the news media trying to alter the tapes and the testimonies of people.
Yeah, and we don't try criminal cases in the media. We've learned that lesson, and we shouldn't be doing it. That's what we have courts for. We try.
Lacey Peterson and how many others?
Yeah, we try our criminal cases in a court of law. You know, he'll get his day in court.
Yeah.
You know. And if there were violations, if there are problems in the Sanford Police Department, they need to be investigated and they need to be corrected. But there's a process for doing that.
Well, apparently Obama believes that it's not tried in a court because the court has no authority, according to him.
No, Obama and Del Sharpton and Jesse Jackson are trying to get a lynch mob together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just, it's strange to me. The left always complains about these things, but when it's to their advantage, I guess it's the same with not only progressives but conservatives. You know, you listen to the president, the court should not be engaged in judicial activism, except on matters of DOMA, don't ask, don't tell, gay marriage, where, you know, not only the courts ruled it, but the people have voted on those issues. It wasn't just a legislative act, it was the people actually voting, and the progressives go to the courts to get the will of the people overturned because they didn't care for the decision that the people had made.
Yeah.
This is absolutely so hypocritical, it's unbelievable.
We can't have ends justifies the means of morality, which is what the progressives have.
No. You know, if it disagrees with your social engineering agenda, then you have the right to go to the courts and get these judicially activist judges to overturn the decision of the people. Not just the legislature, but the people who were given the right to vote on the issue. So it's kind of astounding. You know, the hypocrisy is just unbelievable.
the master scenario of your utopianism is just to return to childhood fantasy.
Yes. It's just, you kick and whine and scream and throw a tantrum until you get your way.
Yeah.
And this is just, when it seeps into the highest levels of our government, we have a real problem.
No. I don't know if you heard, but the Journal of Medical Ethics published an article by two of these supposed bioethicists about killing newborns.
Oh, yes. I heard that, I heard that, yes.
Yeah, and then the authors were wondering why they got a bunch of angry emails.
It's just, I have to wonder, how far removed from reality are these people? They're totally out of touch with the moral compass of the nation, certainly of the world, I think.
Of the world, of history, everything. I've never heard any ethicist from any religion say it's all right to kill newborns.
Well, the last time that happened was the Roman Empire. And that was overturned by, once Christianity became the state religion, that ended.
Yeah.
That infanticide just ended.
I don't think a species is going to be successful that starts killing their young. Just my opinion, but
no.
If you want to put it on a more scientific basis, besides just being morally horrible, monstrous.
Yes, it's just, these, it seems to be an attempt to test the outer edges of what's acceptable and what is not.
Well,
they're attempting to find out if their propaganda is working. And, of course, that would be more popular, oddly enough, with people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who grew up in the, during the so-called sexual revolution. Than it would be with younger people 30 and under now, who are opposed to unlimited abortion and infanticide.
You called this. You told me this was going to happen 20 years ago. So
yeah, where these younger people are going to start looking around and asking, where are my brothers and sisters? Where are my siblings that would have been born? That my, the classmates that I would have had. Where are they? They've all been killed. And why am I being threatened with no Social Security coverage, no social safety network? Well, 50 million of your fellow citizens were killed in the womb. And then there's the shadow abortion figure. Because those 50 million were killed, their children, who would have been killed off as well. So we're talking not 50 million, but 100 million citizens who have been killed off in a generation that would have been productive. These ideas are just bad.
Yeah.
This infusion of this Malthusian social Darwinism. It's all very dangerous, and it's all proven very bad.
Well, this is like we talked about Gramercy as an earlier show. The leftists thought if they destroyed the culture, people would go to them, but of course it was a big backfire. You just get snookies.
Yes, Snooki. Well, Snooki got married, I think, recently. Speaking of her, an update.
Well, good for her.
Yeah, she got married.
But, yeah, you just get a hyper-individualism is what I'm saying. You don't get any collectivism. The whole thing backfired on them. Now we have school bullying and everything else once you destroy the culture.
Yeah. So it's...
You just go back to primate politics of gangs or tribes.
Well, we need to correct this, and this is... I certainly hope the Conservative Party can get it together and stop with this theocratic nonsense that they seem to be focused on, and try to create a... there's Snooki with her new husband up on the screen. So, but we need to get a serious discussion of these issues, and you're right now in school, Eric. You're probably touching on these topics in your philosophy courses. Is anyone really well informed on these issues? Even people who are focused on this particular discipline?
No. Academia is like an isolated island where people just interbreed.
Well,
like an incestuous little island that's protected.
Let's talk about that. Our next episode, which will not be next week. Daniel will be out of town on a business trip. Our next episode will not be March 20th, since March 20th has already occurred.
Yeah. April
20th, is it?
April 14th.
Yeah, April 14th.
Yeah.
April 20th, okay. April 20th will be our next episode. Let's discuss the state of education in the United States.
Okay.
Let's discuss, I think that's important so that people will understand why things are as bad as they are. We're not producing people who can think critically. We are producing simply workers, which is what the Rockefeller foundations, the Carnegie Foundation and so on had in mind, so that we could create a class of worker bees and people who would not seriously examine the state of the economy or the body politic. So that'll be our topic for April the 20th, which will be our next episode. Remember our Twitter hashtag WIRTV, our email, david@weekinreview.tv, eric@weekinreview.tv, and daniel@weekinreview.tv. Please send us your comments, observations, queries, criticisms. We're happy to receive them. And if you have an idea for an episode or a topic you'd like us to discuss, we'd be happy to do that as well. Again, thank you for joining us. This has been Week in Review, and we'll see you again on April 20th.
Mr. Madison, I've detected a flaw in the Constitution. Nothing in it allows the government to confiscate wealth for redistribution.
That's not a flaw, sir. That's the point. Had Obama talking to President Madison.